The relationship is really beneficial for both the tenant and landlord. A landlord wants somebody who's going to stay there and take care of the property. One thing's for certain, no one is going to take as good a care of property as you are, if it's your property.
Right.
You own the property, you have a vested interest in the property. The tenant doesn't have the same thing. But if you build a relationship with the tenant and they start to feel a sense of ownership or a sense of longevity in that property, it really can help you as the owner because they're going to take care of it.
Thanks for joining us on another REI-NWA podcast. This is podcast episode number 13, and I'm your host, Coley Bailey, with the Lone Rock team at Fathom Realty, and we have the wonderful Jenna Fogleman Saifi with us today. I got the name right, I think. Did I get it right?
It's right.
I got it right. Nailed it. Here we go.
Off to a great start.
Yes, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. So, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got started doing what you're doing and where you grew up. What's your story?
Okay. So, I grew up in Northeast Arkansas in Jonesboro and moved to Indiana when I was a junior in high school and graduated high school up there, went to Purdue University. I have my family, I'm an attorney, and my family, we have a lot of attorneys. So I always kind of knew that was my path, but at Purdue, I took a class, and the professor, as hard as he was really influential on my education. And he told me, you need to go to law school. And I was like, okay, well, that was kind of the plan, but that really helped. And then
Sometimes the most influential people are the ones who are the hardest on you.
oh man, it was the most difficult class I've ever had, and I spent a lot of all-nighters just trying to get through his class, but I took the second semester of it, which no one else did.
Yeah.
So that was, maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, but it was really helpful, I think, in going to law school to take that. And so when I went to law school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do other than obviously be an attorney, but there's a lot of different areas that you can practice in. And I got a job right out of law school at Miller Butler, which is where I am now, and did civil litigation. And I did litigation for about 4.5 years, and then transitioned to doing more business transactions. But real estate has been something that I've done throughout. So I did real estate litigation when I started, and then now I do more of an advisory role in real estate and also paper a lot of real estate transactions and 1031s, and just kind of advise my commercial landlords and tenants. So I really enjoy, that's probably my favorite practice area is real estate, but I enjoy everything that I do, but that one is definitely the most fun.
Cool. All right, so you have been tasked with a good topic, which is building successful tenant relationships, really important for any investor. And so this is going to be a landlord lunch program coming up, by the way, on December 12th, 2023. And so let's talk about that a little bit. How do you think about those tenant relationships, and how do we really set the right tone with new tenants?
Yeah, I think the relationship is really beneficial for both the tenant and landlord. A landlord wants somebody who's going to stay there and take care of the property. One thing's for certain, no one is going to take as good a care of property as you are, if it's your property.
Right.
You own the property, you have a vested interest in the property. The tenant doesn't have the same thing. But if you build a relationship with the tenant and they start to feel a sense of ownership or a sense of longevity in that property, it really can help you as the owner because they're going to take care of it. They're going to pay on time. They're going to respect you as a person and not just as somebody that they, owe money to. And I just think it really can be beneficial for both parties.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so what type of questions should we be asking tenants in that initial interview?
I think I want to say, no, don't make it an interview first.
Okay.
I think that's really important. I think a conversational tone is really important to get people to open up. There is information that you're going to want that they may not be necessarily wanting to provide, but to keep your questions open-ended is going to lead them to that path more than asking them direct questions. So I think that's really important, just to set that initial tone of what questions you're going to ask. There are questions you definitely want to ask as far as, why are you moving? Why do you want to, live here? What is your timeline? When do you want to move in? That makes, a lot of difference to you whether or not this is somebody you want to rent to. And then, do you have pets? That's a question landlords always want to know, right? What was your last rental experience like? What do you look for in a landlord? What's an aspect that you like in a landlord? That can kind of tell you their rental experience. I think somebody that doesn't have a lot of experience may not know what is good or bad about a landlord. But somebody that does rent a lot may have good feedback on that. And then you're also asking them for feedback, giving them some sort of ownership in the conversation, which can help build that relationship from the start.
Okay, anything to avoid? Any topics or questions not to get into?
Yes, so there is the Fair Housing Act, which may or may not apply to every landlord that's listening here today, but I would say your best practice is to act as if it applies to you. And the Fair Housing Act does regulate what questions you can ask as far as not discriminating against certain criteria. So one is familial status. So don't ask somebody, are you married? Do you have a partner? Can't ask those questions. Don't ask somebody if, they're wheelchair bound. So what's the nature of your disability? Can't ask those questions. You cannot ask certain questions about service animals. So if they have an animal and, they've said this is a service animal, there's certain, I would probably stop there. There are certain questions that you cannot ask them as far as, well, what are they trained to do? You can't ask that question. So it's keeping boundaries there on don't ask questions about race, don't ask questions about disabilities, about family, about marital status. Don't ask it. You can ask how many people are going to live here, but you cannot ask how many adults necessarily or how many kids, because then that can lead to what's the familial status here.
Okay.
And so you just have to be kind of careful with those questions.
Right. Okay, we're going to get into a few more details on how to establish great tenant relationships with Jenna right after this word from our sponsor. Are you struggling with real estate code compliance? Let Ordinal, your AI navigator, simplify it for you. Receive clear answers to your nuanced compliance questions in seconds with citations included. Currently, the Ordinal beta version specializes in the Northwest Arkansas cities of Bentonville, Fayetteville, Springdale, and Rogers. Join the beta version now and get your first month free using the promo code REI. After that, it's just $12 a month. Visit breakground.ai/Ordinal or click the link in the description below. Start incorporating AI into your real estate workflows today with Ordinal. All right, Jenna, so what sort of red flags do you look out for either in a background check or when you're speaking with these people? What do you really want to make sure you're taking into account there?
I think one of the good things about an in-person interview or having them come view the property and meeting them in person is you can smell for smoke. A lot of landlords don't want people smoking in their property, and you don't necessarily, you're not asking the question. You can ask that question, do you smoke? But you're gathering that information without having to directly ask.
Right. Also,
I think another red flag is if somebody obviously has an eviction on their record. Somebody has a bad credit score. That could mean that they, may have had past rental issues that didn't necessarily go to litigation or an unlawful detainer, but that they vacated a property and the landlord turned them over to collections. Other red flags are, crimes, criminal activity. Not always a red flag. I want to make that clear. And you can't ask that question. Have you committed a crime? But something to be aware of, and if you do see criminal activity on their record, just looking into a little bit more of the nature of that to make sure that it's not something that could potentially put liability on you as well as the landlord.
Right. Okay, the last thing I want to get into is best practices for long-term success with tenants.
I think the first one and most important is to under-promise and over-perform. I think that's really important because if you set a tone with a tenant that you're going to do all of these things or you're going to take care of all these things that your lease doesn't necessarily obligate you to do, you're probably setting yourself up for failure because the tenant's going to expect all of that.
Right.
And you may decide, oh, it's cost prohibitive. I cannot do this. But you've already promised those aspects. So I think to always under-promise, over-perform. You can always do those things, and then it's a bonus, and that tenant really appreciates that.
Okay, great. What else?
I think to pick your battles with tenants is really important. There, in most leases, are waiver provisions that say if you don't always enforce something, that doesn't mean later you can't enforce it.
Right.
And if you have a great tenant that's always pays on time, takes great care of the property, maybe it's the tenant's obligation to repair everything in the premises, but they break a toilet. And your best friend's a plumber, you can get it done really quickly. I would probably shift that cost to myself and just say, I'm gonna take care of this one because this tenant takes care of the yard, they landscape, they do everything else. It's just knowing what battles to choose to go after and what to maybe not go after every time.
Right. All right, this is going to be a really good talk. I could already tell. There's a wealth of knowledge there. There's a lot of topics that we can go down. And so this is going to be a landlord lunch, which means it's at noon on December 12th, 2023. It's going to be at the Wagon Wheel Café in Springdale. Make sure you come. It's going to be $20 at the door or free for REI-NWA members. And you'll get to hear all of this from Jenna in much greater detail and ask all your questions. It's going to be great. So how can people find out more about you and what you do?
Sure. We have a website, www.arcattorneys.com, and that lists all of our attorneys, the services that we provide, and there's Facebook and Instagram as well that's also under ARC Attorneys, so check it out.
All right. Thanks so much for coming in. This has been really good. I can't wait for your landlord lunch, and we'll see you guys on the next one.